Edward didn't just shove the new waitress, he slammed her against the door so hard the walls shook. And he never noticed the Mafia boss rising from the shadows behind him. One more second and Edward's hand would have crushed her throat until a voice colder than steel said, "Touch her again." What happened next flipped the entire bar upside down and exposed a secret that could burn the whole city. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. She was only supposed to refill glasses and wipe down tables on her first night. But Edward's fingers tightened around her collar, slamming her back against the office door hard enough to rattle the frame. What Edward didn't know was that someone else stood behind the bar shelf, someone whose tattoos crawled up his neck like shadows, someone who owned the bar and half the city. 6 hours earlier, Jennifer Ruiz smoothed down her white button-up shirt for the third time, her reflection in the bathroom mirror showing a young woman trying desperately to look confident. 23 years old, dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, minimal makeup because her mother always said, "Let them see your face, Mija. You have nothing to hide." Black Lantern Bar sat in the heart of the financial district, wedged between glass towers and old money steakhouses. Jennifer had walked past it 100 times, always admiring the warm glow spilling onto the sidewalk, the silhouettes of wealthy patrons visible through frosted windows. She never imagined she'd work here, but rent was due in 6 days, and the interview had been surprisingly easy. Edward Crane, the manager, had hired her on the spot. "You've got an honest face," he'd said, smiling. "That's what we need here." Now, standing at the employee entrance at 5 p.m. sharp, Jennifer wondered if honest faces were really what places like this wanted. The interior took her breath away. Polished mahogany walls absorbed the amber glow of Edison bulbs. Leather booths lined one wall, each table set with crystal glasses that caught the light like trapped stars. Behind the bar, rows of whiskey bottles stood like soldiers' labels she'd only heard about in movies. Pappy Van Winkle. Macallan 25. Bottles that cost more than her monthly salary. "Jennifer!" Edward appeared from the back office, his suit perfectly pressed, his smile wide. "Ready for your first shift?" "Yes, sir." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Good. Friday nights are our busiest. Keep the drinks flowing, smile, and don't overthink anything." He handed her a small notepad. "Table assignments are simple. You've got sections 2 and 3 tonight, high rollers, so the tips will be worth it." The next 3 hours blurred together. Jennifer learned to glide between tables without appearing rushed, to read body language for when patrons needed refills, to remember names after hearing them once. Mr. Castellano in booth 7 was celebrating a business deal. The couple at table 9 was on their anniversary. The group of lawyers at table 12 was debating a case in hushed, urgent tones. She was good at this, the observation, the anticipation, the quiet service that made people feel cared for without being intrusive. Her mother had cleaned houses for 20 years, and she'd taught Jennifer that watching people, truly watching them, was a skill that kept you valuable. By 8:30 p.m., Jennifer's feet ached, but she felt something close to pride. She hadn't dropped anything, hadn't forgotten an order, hadn't. "Jennifer." Edward's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood at the server station, holding a receipt. "Process this, table 7. She took the slip, glancing at the details. Mr. Castellano's tab. 1 appetizer, 1 entree, 1 bourbon. Her eyes caught on the last line. Pappy Van Winkle, 23 year, $220. Jennifer's stomach dropped. She'd served Mr. Castellano his bourbon herself an hour ago. He'd ordered Woodford Reserve she'd double-checked because she was nervous about mixing up the premium labels. Woodford was $70. Pappy Van Winkle was. She glanced at the price list behind the bar. $220. That was a $150 difference. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked up at Edward. He was watching her, his expression pleasant but his eyes sharp. "Something wrong?" he asked. Jennifer's mouth went dry. "The bourbon." Mr. Castellano ordered Woodford Reserve. "This says Pappy." Edward's smile didn't falter. "I upgraded him. Customer service." "But," Jennifer's voice was barely above a whisper, "he didn't ask for an upgrade. And you're charging him." The air between them changed. Around them, Black Lantern hummed with Friday evening energy, the clink of glasses, soft jazz from hidden speakers, the murmur of expensive conversations. But in the 3 feet separating Jennifer from Edward, something cold settled in. "You questioning my management?" Edward's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes had gone flat. She should have backed down, should have nodded and processed the payment. But Mr. Castellano had thanked her so kindly for the water refill, had smiled at her like she was a person and not just staff. The thought of stealing from him made her feel sick. "I'm questioning the bill," Jennifer said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "That's theft, sir." Edward's face flushed deep red. The word hung between them like a lit fuse. "Say that again," he said softly. Before Jennifer could respond, Edward's hand shot out and grabbed her collar, his knuckles white with sudden rage. Jennifer gasped as he yanked her backward, her feet stumbling as he shoved her toward the back office. Her shoulder hit the doorframe first, then her back slammed against the wooden door with enough force to rattle it in its hinges. A tear escaped down her cheek before she could stop it. "You don't call me a thief," Edward hissed, his face inches from hers, his breath hot with anger. What neither of them saw was the figure standing 15 feet away, half hidden behind the shelves of premium whiskey. Lanfranco Morris watched with dark, calculating eyes, and his jaw tightened. Lanfranco Morris had built his empire on reading moments other men missed, the way a rival's eye twitched before a lie, the hesitation before a handshake that signaled betrayal, the split-second decision that separated those who survived from those who disappeared into the East River wearing concrete shoes. Right now, watching Edward Crane's hand twisted in Jennifer Ruiz's collar, Lanfranco read everything he needed to know. The girl was terrified, her tear-streaked face, the way her fingers clutched uselessly at Edward's wrist, the tremor in her breath. But beneath the fear was something else, something that reminded him of his sister, Sophia, 20 years ago. That same stubborn refusal to bend, even when bending would have saved her life. Lanfranco's jaw tightened as Edward shoved Jennifer harder against the door. He stepped out from behind the bar shelves. The ambient noise of Black Lantern, the jazz, the conversations, the clink of crystal seemed to fade as his footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. 3 steps. 5. His presence carved through the space like a knife through silk. Edward heard the footsteps and froze. He turned, his grip still on Jennifer's collar, his face flushed with rage that drained the moment he saw who was approaching. Every ounce of color left his cheeks. "Mr. Morris," Edward stammered, his hand releasing Jennifer so quickly she nearly stumbled. I didn't know you were. Is there a problem here?" Lanfranco's voice was low, measured, the kind of quiet that made smart men nervous. His dark eyes moved from Edward to Jennifer, taking in the tear on her cheek, the red marks on her throat where Edward's fingers had gripped too tight. Jennifer's breath caught. She'd never seen this man before, would have remembered if she had. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, with black hair swept back and tattoos that emerged from his collar and crawled up his neck like living shadows. A dragon's tail curled behind his ear. His tailored gray suit probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, and he wore it like armor. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark, intense, and currently fixed on Edward with an expression that made the temperature drop 10 degrees. "No problem, sir," Edward said quickly, his voice climbing an octave. "Just a misunderstanding with the new hire. She's still learning the systems." The systems. Lanfranco repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them for poison. His gaze shifted to Jennifer. "What's your name?" "Jennifer Ruiz, sir." Her voice was barely a whisper. "First night?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Lanfranco's attention returned to Edward, and Jennifer watched the manager visibly shrink under that stare. "Edward, my office. Now." It wasn't a request. Edward's face went pale. "Of course, Mr. Morris. Right away." Lanfranco gestured toward the back office, the same door Jennifer had been slammed against moments ago. Edward moved toward it like a man walking to his execution, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Before following, Lanfranco turned back to Jennifer. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Take 5 minutes. Bathrooms down the hall. Compose yourself." Then he was gone, the office door clicking shut behind him with a sound that felt final. Jennifer's hands shook as she pushed open the bathroom door. The elegant space, all marble countertops and gold fixtures, felt surreal after what had just happened. She gripped the sink's edge, staring at her reflection. Her collar was wrinkled where Edward had grabbed her. A faint red mark showed on her throat. Her mascara had smudged slightly from the single tear she'd allowed to fall. What have I done? She'd called her manager a thief on her first night, got herself assaulted. And then some intimidating stranger in an expensive suit. Mr. Morris had appeared like something out of a crime movie. She didn't even know who he was. Owner? Corporate? Someone important enough to make Edward Crane look like he'd seen a ghost. Jennifer ran cold water over her wrists, trying to slow her racing heart. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Stand up for what's right, Mija, even when it costs you. Well, it had definitely cost her. This job was over before it started. She fixed her collar, wiped away the smudged mascara, and took a deep breath. Whatever was happening in that office, she'd face the consequences. At least she could tell her mother she hadn't compromised. When Jennifer returned to the floor 8 minutes later, Edward was already back at the server station. But he was different. His face was pale, almost gray. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the bar's perfect climate control. When he saw Jennifer, he flinched, actually flinched, and looked away. Table 7 needs their check, he said without meeting her eyes. His voice had lost all its earlier confidence. Just process what they actually ordered. Jennifer stared at him. What? You heard me. Edward's hands trembled as he shuffled through receipts. Woodford Reserve. $70. Like the customer ordered. He thrust the corrected receipt at her and walked away quickly, almost desperately, toward the kitchen. Jennifer stood frozen, the paper in her hand, trying to process what had just happened. In the back office, visible through the small window in the door, she could see Mr. Morris. He was seated at the desk, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his dark eyes fixed on something she couldn't see. He'd been watching her the entire time, and somehow, that thought made her more nervous than Edward's violence had. Jennifer didn't sleep that night. She lay in her studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying every moment. Edward's hand on her collar, the door rattling against her spine, those dark eyes watching from the shadows. Mr. Morris's quiet voice that had drained all the fight from Edward Crane like someone had pulled a plug. Just process what they actually ordered. Edward had been terrified. Not angry, not defensive. Terrified. Which meant Mr. Morris was someone who inspired fear in men who thought they were untouchable. By 6 a.m., Jennifer had convinced herself she wouldn't go back. She'd find another job, something safe, something that didn't involve managers who assaulted employees or mysterious men with neck tattoos who appeared from shadows like avenging angels. By 4 p.m., she was walking through Black Lantern's employee entrance. She told herself it was because she needed the money. Rent was due in 4 days, and she had $300 in her account. But the truth was more complicated. Something about last night, about standing up to Edward, about Mr. Morris's intervention, about the way the fear in Edward's eyes suggested she'd stumbled into something bigger than a padded bar tab made leaving feel like running. And Jennifer's mother hadn't raised a runner. The Saturday evening shift started quietly. Edward avoided her completely, assigning her to sections on the opposite side of the bar from wherever he stationed himself. The other servers, 2 women and a man who'd worked there for years, watched her with a mix of curiosity and wariness, like she was a live grenade they weren't sure had been defused. No one mentioned last night. No one asked if she was okay. But Jennifer noticed things. She'd always been observant, a survival skill learned from her mother, who'd needed to read the moods of the wealthy families she cleaned for, to know when to be invisible and when her presence was required. Jennifer had inherited that radar, and now it was screaming. Edward made 3 trips to the back office during her shift, each time emerging with a small stack of receipts that he immediately shredded. The bartender, Marcus, a lean man with silver temples and careful hands, watched Edward with an expression Jennifer couldn't quite read. Disgust? Suspicion? Fear? Then there were the transactions themselves. Table 4 ordered 2 old fashions. Jennifer served them personally. When she checked the receipt an hour later, it listed 3. Table 9 had a $45 bottle of Chardonnay. The bill read $85 Chablis. Table 12's appetizer, a $16 charcuterie board, had become a $40 premium version they'd never received. Every single discrepancy flowed through Edward's tablet. Every single one happened when he processed the final bills. Jennifer's stomach twisted. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a system, methodical, practiced. And if it was happening on her tables, it was happening everywhere. During her break, Jennifer sat in the small staff room, her hands wrapped around lukewarm coffee. A small notebook lay in her apron pocket, something she'd grabbed that morning on impulse, thinking she'd use it to track orders and preferences for regulars. Now she pulled it out and stared at the blank pages. This is crazy, she thought. You barely survived your first night. You should keep your head down. But Mr. Castellano's kind smile flashed through her mind. Table 9's anniversary couple, laughing over their wine. Table 12's lawyers, already dealing with enough sharks without their own bartender robbing them blind. Jennifer uncapped her pen. Saturday, 6:47 p.m. Table 4. Ordered 2 old fashions, $16 each equals $32. Bill shows $348. Difference, $16. She felt ridiculous, like a child playing detective, but she kept writing. Table 9. Ordered house Chardonnay, $45. Billed as Chablis, $85. Difference, $40. By the end of her shift, she documented 7 discrepancies. $240 in fraudulent charges across her section alone. If Edward was doing this to every server's tables, every shift, the numbers made her feel sick. You staying late? Jennifer jumped, nearly dropping her notebook. Marcus, the bartender, stood in the doorway, wiping down a mixing glass with a white cloth. His expression was neutral, but his eyes lingered on the notebook before moving to her face. Just finishing up my tips, Jennifer said quickly, tucking the notebook back into her apron. Marcus nodded slowly. Word of advice? Whatever you're doing, be careful. This place, it's not what it looks like. What do you mean? But Marcus was already walking away, his warning hanging in the air like smoke. Jennifer left through the employee exit at 11:30 p.m., her notebook pressed against her ribs beneath her jacket. The financial district was quieter at night, the glass towers dark, except for the occasional lit office where someone was working late. She was halfway to the subway when she felt it. Someone was watching her. She turned, her heart suddenly racing. The street behind her was empty, except for a black Mercedes idling at the corner, its windows tinted dark. Jennifer couldn't see inside, but she could feel the weight of someone's attention like a physical pressure against her skin. The car didn't move, didn't follow when she started walking again, but she felt those invisible eyes on her back all the way to the subway entrance. And when she finally descended into the fluorescent safety of the underground, she could have sworn she saw the Mercedes pull away. Inside that car, Lanfranco Morris sat in the back seat, his phone dark in his hand, his eyes narrowed in thought. The girl was keeping records. Smart, dangerous, brave. Just like Sophia had been, Lanfranco Morris didn't believe in coincidences. When a manager assaulted a waitress on her first night, that was reckless stupidity. When that same waitress documented financial discrepancies in a notebook she thought was hidden, that was courage bordering on suicidal. When both happened within 24 hours at his flagship bar, that was a pattern. And patterns meant someone was either very clever or very desperate. He needed to know which. Sunday morning found Lanfranco in his private office, not the one at Black Lantern, but the real one, housed in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, where the East River whispered against concrete pilings and questions went unanswered. His second-in-command, Vincent Calabrese, sat across the desk, a tablet glowing between them. Edward Crane, Vincent said, his gravelly voice flat with the kind of disgust reserved for rats and traitors. Been the bar manager for 18 months. Clean record before that, corporate hotels, upscale restaurants, all the right references. Too clean? Lanfranco asked. I'm getting to that. Vincent swiped through files. Started noticing the discrepancies about 6 months ago. Small stuff at first. A bottle here, an upgraded charge there. Thought maybe he was just greedy. But then, he turned the tablet around. Bank statements filled the screen. Edward's personal accounts. Obtained through means Lanfranco didn't ask about, and Vincent didn't explain. He's been depositing cash. Small amounts, never more than $3,000 at a time to avoid flags. But it adds up. Roughly $40,000 in the last 5 months. Lanfranco's jaw tightened. Black Lantern pulled 7 figures annually. Edward's theft was barely a rounding error. But that wasn't the point. The point was loyalty, trust, the invisible threads that held his world together. Fire him, Lanfranco said simply. There's more. Vincent swiped again. A photograph appeared. Edward, sitting in a parked car, talking to someone in the driver's seat. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but the driver's face was clear enough. Arthur Klein. Lanfranco went very still, the kind of still that made smart men nervous. Arthur Klein ran the Southside Crew rival territory. Smaller operation, but ambitious in ways that made him dangerous. He'd been testing Lanfranco's boundaries for 2 years, probing for weaknesses, looking for angles. Nothing overt enough to justify a response, but persistent enough to be irritating. When was this taken? Thursday night, 2 hours before your little waitress started her shift. Vincent leaned back, his expression grim. We've got 3 more meetings over the past month. Always in cars, always cash exchanged. Lanfranco's mind worked through the implications like a chess player analyzing a board. Edward wasn't just stealing, he was feeding information to Arthur Klein. But what information? Black Lantern's financials were legitimate mostly. The bar washed a percentage of his other income, but it was sophisticated enough that even a federal audit would find nothing actionable, unless someone was building a trail. "What's Edward giving him?" Lanfranco asked quietly. Vincent pulled up another document. Falsified receipts, altered ledgers, transaction records that don't match the actual sales. He met Lanfranco's eyes. Someone's creating a paper trail that makes it look like you're laundering way more than you actually are. Inflated numbers, phantom transactions, all of it pointing back to you. The picture crystallized with brutal clarity. Arthur Klein wasn't trying to steal territory or customers. He was building a case. Frame Lanfranco for massive money laundering, feed the evidence to the right federal prosecutor, and watch the empire collapse from the inside. While Lanfranco fought legal battles and federal charges, Klein would sweep in and absorb everything. It was clever, almost elegant. How far along is he? Unknown. But if they've been doing this for 5 months, Vincent trailed off, the implication clear. 5 months of falsified records could be enough for an indictment, maybe even a conviction, if the prosecutor was ambitious and the judge was hostile. "And the girl?" Lanfranco asked. "Jennifer. Where does she fit?" Vincent pulled up a new file, Jennifer's employee profile, her application, her background check. Nobody. Clean history. Works 2 jobs to make rent. Mother's a house cleaner in Queens. No criminal record. No connections to anyone in our world or Klein's. He paused. She's exactly what she looks like. A waitress who noticed something wrong and can't keep her mouth shut about it, which makes her a problem for Edward. A big one. If she keeps documenting discrepancies, she's building evidence that contradicts the false trail he's creating. She's showing the charges are fraudulent, which means his inflated numbers don't reflect reality. Lanfranco stood, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the river. Sunlight glinted off the water, and in the distance, the city rose like a promise or a threat, depending on who you were. Jennifer Ruiz had stumbled into the middle of something she couldn't possibly understand. She thought she was exposing a petty thief. She had no idea she was dismantling a conspiracy designed to destroy everything Lanfranco had built. Edward would have realized that by now. Which meant Jennifer wasn't just a witness anymore. She was an obstacle. And Arthur Klein didn't leave obstacles standing. "Put a detail on her," Lanfranco said, his voice cold and final. 24 hours. She doesn't know they're there, and they don't interfere unless someone makes a move. "And Edward?" Lanfranco turned from the window, his expression carved from stone. "Let him think he's winning. I want to know everyone involved before we move. Arthur Klein doesn't do anything without backup. There are more players in this." Vincent nodded and stood to leave, but paused at the door. "The girl. She's got courage. Stupid courage, but still." "I know," Lanfranco said quietly. "The kind of courage that got people killed." Jennifer's third shift started with a text message she almost missed. "Unknown number. Stay aware tonight. Trust your instincts." She stared at the screen, her coffee halfway to her lips, her stomach immediately nodding. The message had arrived at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before she needed to leave for work. No context. No signature. Just a warning that felt both protective and threatening. She typed back, "Who is this?" The response came instantly. "A friend." Jennifer deleted the thread and tried to convince herself it was a wrong number, but her hands shook as she buttoned her white shirt, and the notebook in her apron pocket felt heavier than it had any right to. Black Lantern was unusually quiet for a Monday evening. Only half the tables were occupied, and the typical buzz of weekend energy had settled into something more subdued. Jennifer moved through her section mechanically, her radar that survival instinct her mother had taught her screaming that something was off. Edward watched her constantly, not with his usual dismissive arrogance, but with something that looked like calculation, like he was working through a problem, and she was one of the variables. At 7:15 p.m., during the lull between early diners and late arrivals, Edward appeared at her station. "Jennifer, storage room. Need you to help me inventory the wine." It wasn't a request. Jennifer's pulse spiked. The storage room was in the basement, concrete walls, a single exit, no cameras. She'd been down there once during training, and the isolation had made her uncomfortable even with 3 other people present. "I'm about to take table 6's order," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Marcus can cover it." Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This won't take long." Every instinct Jennifer possessed was screaming at her to refuse. But refusing meant making a scene, and making a scene meant losing this job she desperately needed. She thought of the text message. Trust your instincts. But which instinct? The one that said run? Or the one that said she couldn't afford to? Of course, she heard herself say. The basement stairs descended into cool darkness that smelled of oak barrels and old stone. Edward flicked on the lights, and fluorescent tubes buzzed to life, casting harsh shadows across rows of wine racks and stacked liquor boxes. The single door at the top of the stairs clicked shut behind them. They were alone. "So," Edward said, his pleasant tone evaporating like morning fog. "You've been busy." Jennifer's mouth went dry. "I don't understand." "Don't play stupid. It's insulting." Edward moved between her and the stairs, his positioning deliberate. "You've been writing things down, watching me, documenting transactions." Her heart slammed against her ribs. How did he know? She'd been careful. The notebook never left her apron, and she only wrote during breaks, in the bathroom, away from cameras and eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jennifer said, but her voice wavered. Edward's expression hardened. "Show me your apron." "No, that wasn't a request." He stepped closer, and Jennifer instinctively backed up until her shoulders hit the wine rack. Bottles rattled. "You think you're clever? You think you can come in here and destroy what I've built?" "You're stealing from customers," Jennifer said, her fear crystallizing into anger. "That's not building anything. That's survival." Edward's voice cracked like a whip. "You think this city hands out opportunities? You think people like us, people who weren't born into penthouses, get to play by their rules?" He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, see the vein pulsing in his temple. "I take what's owed to me. What I've earned. By lying? By being smart, something you're clearly not." His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. "Give me the notebook." "Let go of me." Jennifer tried to pull away, but Edward's fingers tightened. "Give me the notebook, or I swear to God." "Or what?" The voice came from the top of the stairs. Edward's head snapped up. Jennifer's breath caught. Lanfranco Morris stood in the doorway, backlit by the bar's ambient light, his silhouette dark and absolute. He descended 3 steps, each footfall deliberate, and the temperature in the basement seemed to drop with each one. "Mr. Morris." Edward released Jennifer's wrist so quickly she stumbled. You were just what?" "No." Lanfranco's voice was soft, controlled, and more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "Explaining inventory? Is that why you have your hands on my employee?" "She's been documenting," Edward started, then seemed to realize what he was about to admit. Lanfranco reached the basement floor. He didn't look at Edward. His dark eyes were fixed on Jennifer, taking in her pale face, the red mark on her wrist where Edward had grabbed her, the way she was pressed against the wine rack like a trapped animal. "Are you hurt?" he asked her. Jennifer shook her head, not trusting her voice. Lanfranco's jaw tightened. Then, finally, he turned to Edward. The look in his eyes made Jennifer's blood run cold, and she wasn't even the target. "My office," Lanfranco said quietly. "Now." "Sir, I can explain." "Now." Edward flinched and moved toward the stairs, but Lanfranco caught his shoulder. His grip looked casual, almost gentle, but Edward went white. "If you ever touch her again," Lanfranco said, his voice barely above a whisper, "they'll find pieces of you in 3 different rivers. Do you understand me?" Edward nodded frantically. Lanfranco released him, and Edward practically ran up the stairs. Silence filled the basement. Jennifer's legs felt weak. She was dimly aware that she was shaking. Lanfranco turned back to her, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Come upstairs," he said gently. "We need to talk." Jennifer had been in Lanfranco's office once before, pressed against its door with Edward's hand on her collar, fear choking the air from her lungs. Walking through it voluntarily felt surreal, like stepping into a memory that hadn't finished happening yet. The space was smaller than she'd imagined, almost intimate. Dark wood paneling absorbed the light from a single desk lamp. Behind the desk, a window overlooked the bar floor through one-way glass, a silent audience to everything that happened below. Leather chairs faced the desk. A bottle of whiskey sat on a side table, unopened, expensive. "Sit," Lanfranco said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Jennifer sat, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Her wrist still throbbed where Edward had grabbed her. She could feel the notebook in her apron pocket like it was burning through the fabric. Lanfranco didn't sit immediately. He moved to the window, his back to her, his hands in his pockets. For a long moment, he just watched the bar below Marcus mixing drinks, the handful of customers scattered across tables, the empty space where Jennifer should have been working. "How old are you, Jennifer?" he asked without turning. 23. "You live alone?" Yes, sir. Family? My mother. In Queens. Jennifer's voice was steady but barely. Sir, am I fired? Lanfranco turned then, and something in his expression caught her off guard. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even disappointment. It was something older, sadder, like he was looking at her and seeing someone else entirely. No, he said simply. You're not fired. He moved to the desk and sat, his dark eyes finding hers across the polished wood. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that? Jennifer nodded. The notebook in your apron. What's in it? Her breath caught. She'd been so careful. How did everyone suddenly know about it? Lanfranco must have read the question on her face. I've been watching you, Jennifer. Not just tonight. Since your first shift, since Edward put his hands on you the first time. He leaned forward slightly. You're observant, meticulous. Every time you see something that doesn't add up, you write it down, don't you? There was no point in lying. Jennifer reached into her apron with shaking hands and pulled out the small notebook. She placed it on the desk between them like an offering. Or a confession. Lanfranco took it carefully, almost reverently. He opened to the first page and began to read. Jennifer watched his face, watched his eyes move across her handwriting, her documented timestamps, table numbers, discrepancies. She'd been keeping records for 3 shifts, 72 transactions, 19 fraudulent charges, $840 in theft. When Lanfranco finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. Do you understand what you have here? He asked quietly. Evidence that Edward is stealing from customers. Yes. But do you understand what this means? Jennifer shook her head, confusion and fear warring in her chest. Lanfranco stood and moved to the window again, the notebook still in his hand. Edward Crane has been working for me for 18 months. In that time, he's been systematically falsifying records, inflating charges, and creating a paper trail designed to make it look like I'm laundering significantly more money through this bar than I actually am. The words hung in the air. Jennifer's mind struggled to process them. He's working with a rival organization. Lanfranco continued, his voice measured, controlled. Their goal is to build enough false evidence to trigger a federal investigation. They want me arrested, convicted, my assets seized. While I'm fighting legal battles, they move in and take everything I've built. Jennifer's mouth went dry. I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? Lanfranco turned, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. Something human beneath the tattoos and the expensive suit and the quiet menace. Because your notebook proves his numbers are lies, he said. You've been documenting the real transactions. What customers actually ordered versus what Edward charged them. Your records show that his inflated trail is fraudulent. Understanding crashed over Jennifer like cold water. I'm evidence. Against his evidence. Yes, Lanfranco moved back to the desk and sat, placing the notebook between them again. Which makes you the last obstacle to their plan. And obstacles, in this world, don't tend to live very long. Fear spiked through Jennifer's chest, sharp and immediate. Are you saying someone wants to hurt you? Yes. Silence you? Absolutely. Lanfranco's voice was gentle but unflinching. Edward realized what you were doing. That's why he cornered you tonight. He was going to destroy your evidence and make sure you couldn't testify to what you'd seen. Jennifer's hands clenched in her lap. Then I'll quit. I'll leave. I won't say anything to anyone, I promise. They won't believe that. Then what am I supposed to do? Her voice cracked, and she hated how young she sounded. How scared. Lanfranco leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his eyes intense. You help me. You keep documenting exactly what you've been documenting. You act like Edward intimidated you into silence. And together, we build a trap so perfect that when it closes, everyone involved goes down at once. You want me to spy for you. I want you to keep doing exactly what you've been doing, noticing things, writing them down, refusing to be complicit in theft. The only difference is now you'll know why it matters. Jennifer stared at him, at this man with shadows crawling up his neck, who spoke about federal investigations and murder like they were weather patterns. Every rational part of her brain screamed to run, but she thought of Mr. Castellano's kind smile. The anniversary couple, the customers who trusted Black Lantern and didn't know they were being robbed. She thought of her mother, who'd spent 20 years cleaning other people's houses without stealing a single thing. If I do this, Jennifer said slowly, and something happens to me, nothing will happen to you. Lanfranco's voice was steel wrapped in silk. You have my word, and in my world that means something. Jennifer took a shaky breath, then she nodded. The next morning, Jennifer woke to 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a single text message. Unknown number. Security detail assigned. You won't see them, but they're there. V. She stared at the message while her coffee grew cold. V. She had no idea who that was, but the implication was clear. Lanfranco had meant what he said. She was being protected. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made her feel like a chess piece being moved across a board she couldn't see. Tuesday evening, Jennifer returned to Black Lantern with her notebook tucked into her apron and fear sitting heavy in her stomach. The plan Lanfranco had outlined was simple in theory, terrifying in practice. Act intimidated. Let Edward think he'd won. Continue documenting, but more carefully. Feed Lanfranco information. Wait for the trap to spring. Simple. Except the part where one mistake could get her killed. Edward was waiting when she arrived for her shift. He looked different. Some of his usual arrogance had returned. Like Lanfranco's warning in the basement had worn off overnight. Or maybe he was just good at pretending. Jennifer. His smile was sharp. We need to talk. Her heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. Afraid, but not defiant. Exactly what a terrified waitress would look like. Yes, sir? About last night. In the storage room. Edward stepped closer, lowering his voice. I think we got off on the wrong foot. You're new. You don't understand how things work here. I may have overreacted. Jennifer said nothing. Let him fill the silence. The thing is, Edward continued, Mr. Morris and I had a conversation. He reminded me that you're under a lot of pressure, new job, big city, trying to make ends meet. He thinks maybe you were just confused about what you saw. Confused, Jennifer repeated softly. Exactly. Edward's smile widened. Transactions can be complicated. Upgrades, substitutions, special requests. It's easy for someone inexperienced to misunderstand. Mr. Morris suggested I take you under my wing. Mentor you. Make sure you understand the system. The word hung between them like a threat disguised as an opportunity. Jennifer looked down at her hands, playing the part of the intimidated girl who'd learned her lesson. I appreciate that, sir. I'm sorry if I caused any problems. No problems at all. Edward's hand landed on her shoulder, and it took everything in Jennifer not to flinch. We're a team here. As long as everyone follows the system, everything works perfectly. You understand? Yes, sir. Good. He squeezed her shoulder once before releasing her. Now get to work. And Jennifer, if you notice anything that confuses you, come to me first, before anyone else. Understood? Understood. Understood. Edward walked away, satisfaction radiating from him like heat. Jennifer exhaled slowly, her hands shaking as she tied her apron. She'd passed the first test. Edward thought she'd been broken, intimidated into compliance. Now came the hard part. Over the next 4 days, Jennifer became a ghost in her own life. She worked her shifts at Black Lantern, smiling at customers, processing their bills, documenting every discrepancy in her notebook during bathroom breaks and stolen moments in the storage room. She acted meek around Edward, asking him questions about complicated charges, letting him mansplain the bar's operations while she memorized every detail. And she saw things. So many things. Edward met twice with a man Jennifer didn't recognize, expensive suit, cold eyes. The kind of man who looked like he bought people instead of befriending them. Their conversations happened in the back alley during smoke breaks. Always brief, always with cash exchanged. The bartender, Marcus, was involved somehow. She'd catch him watching Edward with an expression that was part disgust, part fear. Once, she saw him photograph receipts with his phone when he thought no one was looking. And Lanfranco, she felt his presence even when she couldn't see him. That one-way window in his office. The way conversations would suddenly stop when she entered certain areas. The black Mercedes she spotted 3 times in 4 days, always at a distance, never following too close. You won't see them, but they're there. She documented everything in her notebook. Times, dates, descriptions. The man in the expensive suit, she'd later learn, was Arthur Klein's lieutenant. The cash exchanges, the fake receipts, Marcus's suspicious behavior. Every night, she'd return to her studio apartment, transcribe her handwritten notes into her phone, and send encrypted photos to a number Lanfranco had given her. Then she'd delete the photos and lie awake, staring at her ceiling, wondering if tonight was the night someone decided she knew too much. Friday evening, exactly 1 week after Edward first slammed her against the office door, Jennifer was taking Table 8's order when she felt it. Someone was watching her. Not Lanfranco's protective surveillance. Something else. Something predatory. She glanced up and saw him, the man from the alley, Arthur Klein's lieutenant, sitting alone at table 12. He wasn't looking at a menu, wasn't on his phone. He was watching her with the focused intensity of a hunter tracking prey. Their eyes met across the room. He smiled. Jennifer's blood turned to ice. She finished taking the order on autopilot, her hands somehow steady despite the panic screaming through her veins. When she returned to the server station, she pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and sent a text to Lanfranco's number. "The man from the alley is here. Table 12. He's watching me." The response came within seconds. "I know. Stay calm. You're safe. This is good. It means they're worried. Stay in public areas. Do not go anywhere alone." Jennifer pocketed her phone and looked up. Through the one-way glass of the office window, she could see Lanfranco's silhouette. He was standing, phone in hand, his posture radiating controlled fury. Then she saw something that made her breath catch. Edward emerged from the kitchen and walked directly to table 12. He shook hands with Arthur Klein's lieutenant. They spoke for 30 seconds, Edward gesturing toward Jennifer, the lieutenant nodding, both men smiling like they were discussing sports instead of her fate. Jennifer pulled out her notebook with shaking hands and wrote, "Friday, 8:43 p.m. Edward met with Alleyman at table 12. Discussed me." Both seemed pleased. She didn't know it yet, but that single observation would become the linchpin that brought everything crashing down. In his office, Lanfranco watched the exchange below. His jaw tightened. The trap was ready. Edward had just walked into it. Now came the reckoning. The meeting was set for Sunday night, 2 hours after Black Lantern closed. Jennifer learned about it the way she'd learned everything over the past week, by being invisible, observant, and willing to stand in the back hallway outside the manager's office while Edward talked on his phone, thinking no one could hear him. Sunday, 2 a.m. "The usual place," Edward had said, his voice low and satisfied. "I'll have everything. Receipts, ledgers, the whole package. Enough to bury him." Jennifer had texted Lanfranco immediately. His response was simple. Perfect. Now, standing in her apartment at 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, Jennifer stared at the text message that had arrived 10 minutes ago. "Lanfranco, I need you to come to the warehouse. Vincent will pick you up in 5 minutes. Trust me." Her hands shook as she pulled on jeans and a jacket. This was it. Whatever trap Lanfranco had been building, tonight it closed. And for some reason, he needed her there. A black sedan pulled up exactly 5 minutes later. The driver, a hard-faced man with silver temples who introduced himself as Vincent, said nothing during the 20-minute drive to Red Hook. Jennifer watched the city slide past her window, streetlights painting everything in amber and shadow, and tried to control her breathing. "You're safe." Lanfranco promised, "You're safe." The warehouse sat near the river, its brick facade dark, except for a single lit window on the second floor. Vincent led her through a side entrance, up industrial stairs that echoed with each footstep, and into a room that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Computer monitors lined one wall, showing multiple camera feeds. A conference table dominated the center, and standing at the window overlooking the river was Lanfranco, his back to her, his silhouette sharp against the glass. "Sir," Vincent said quietly. "She's here." Lanfranco turned. He looked different tonight, no suit jacket, just a black button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing more of the tattoos that wound up his arms like living art. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes softened slightly when they found Jennifer. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Did I have a choice?" Jennifer meant it to sound defiant, but it came out scared. "Always." Lanfranco gestured to the conference table. "Sit. I want you to understand what's about to happen." Jennifer sat. Vincent moved to the monitors. Lanfranco remained standing, his hands braced on the table, his attention fully on her. "In 20 minutes, Lanfranco said, "Edward Crane will meet Arthur Klein and 2 of his associates at a parking garage 3 blocks from here. He thinks he's delivering evidence that will destroy me, falsified ledgers, inflated transaction records, everything they need to trigger a federal investigation. But the records are fake," Jennifer said. "Exactly. And your notebook proves it." Lanfranco pulled out her familiar spiral-bound notebook. She'd given it to him 3 days ago, and he'd had it copied, analyzed, cross-referenced. "Your documentation shows what customers actually ordered versus what Edward charged them. It's a perfect contrast to his fabricated trail." Jennifer's stomach twisted. "So what happens tonight?" "Tonight, Edward walks into a meeting that's already compromised. Arthur Klein doesn't know that I've been feeding him edited information through Edward for the past week. The evidence Edward is delivering tonight, we altered it. Every document, every ledger entry, every receipt, we changed the metadata, added inconsistencies, planted proof that Edward fabricated everything. "You're framing him," Jennifer whispered. "I'm exposing him," Lanfranco corrected. "Everything we planted is true, it just points to the actual guilty party instead of me." Vincent spoke from the monitors. "They're arriving." Lanfranco moved to the screens. Jennifer followed, her heart pounding. One monitor showed a parking garage, concrete pillars, dim lighting, shadows that seemed to breathe. A silver BMW pulled in first. 3 men emerged, one she recognized as the lieutenant who'd watched her in the bar. Arthur Klein, presumably, was the tall man in the expensive overcoat who moved like violence was a language he spoke fluently. Then Edward's car arrived. He got out, carrying a leather messenger bag, his expression nervous but excited. He thought he was about to change his life. He had no idea how right he was. The meeting started cordially. Handshakes. Brief conversation. Jennifer couldn't hear, the surveillance was video only. Edward opened the messenger bag and began pulling out documents, spreading them across the trunk of his car like a presentation. Arthur Klein examined the papers, nodding. His lieutenant took photos with his phone. Everything looked perfect. Professional. Like a business transaction between partners. Then Arthur Klein's expression changed. He held up one of the documents, pointing at something. Edward's smile faltered. Klein pulled out his phone, swiped through something, then showed Edward the screen. Even through the grainy surveillance footage, Jennifer could see Edward's face drain of color. "What's happening?" Jennifer asked. "Arthur just realized the documents are compromised," Lanfranco said, his voice clinical. "The metadata shows they were edited multiple times by Edward's computer, using Edward's login credentials, from Edward's IP address. As far as any forensic analyst can tell, Edward fabricated everything himself." On screen, the conversation was escalating. Arthur Klein was shouting now, his face red with rage. Edward backed away, hands raised, clearly trying to explain. But Klein wasn't listening. The lieutenant pulled a gun. Jennifer gasped, but Lanfranco's hand landed gently on her shoulder. "Watch." Black SUVs screamed into the parking garage from 3 directions, tires squealing. Doors flew open. Men in FBI windbreakers poured out, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands Jennifer couldn't hear but could imagine. "Federal agents, get on the ground." Now. Arthur Klein and his associates were face down on concrete within seconds. Edward tried to run, and made it exactly 6 feet before 2 agents tackled him. Jennifer stared at the monitors, her mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. "You called the FBI?" "I called a federal prosecutor I've worked with before, someone who appreciates good intelligence when it's handed to him." Lanfranco's voice was flat, professional. "I gave them everything. Arthur Klein's conspiracy to frame me, Edward's role in fabricating evidence, financial records proving their scheme, and most importantly, testimony from a brave waitress who documented the truth when everyone else looked away." Jennifer's head snapped toward him. "You gave them my notebook?" "A copy. With your permission, which you gave me when you agreed to help." Lanfranco's expression softened. "You were never in danger tonight, Jennifer. Those agents have been watching this meeting for the past hour. Vincent's team provided perimeter security, and you're here because I wanted you to see it end. To know that your courage, your refusal to be complicit actually mattered." On the monitors, Edward was being handcuffed, his face twisted in desperation as he shouted something at the agents. Arthur Klein was already in the back of an SUV, his empire crumbling around him. Jennifer's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now? Arthur Klein faces federal conspiracy charges. Edward faces fraud, extortion, and about a dozen other felonies. Their entire operation collapses." Lanfranco moved to the table and sat across from her. "And you go back to your life. Safer than you were 2 weeks ago. Freer than you've ever been." Jennifer looked at him, this man with shadows crawling up his neck, who'd protected her, used her, and somehow saved her all at once. "Why did you help me? Really?" Something ancient and sad moved behind Lanfranco's eyes. "Because 20 years ago, someone like you tried to do the right thing in my world. And I wasn't strong enough to protect her." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Her name was Sophia. She was my sister, and she died because she refused to be silent." Jennifer's breath caught. "I couldn't save her," Lanfranco continued, "but I could save you. And maybe that matters. Maybe that's enough." Silence filled the warehouse. On the monitors, the FBI was loading Edward into a vehicle. The parking garage was a chaos of flashing lights and federal agents. And in the quiet room overlooking the river, Jennifer Ruiz, a 23-year-old waitress who'd refused to steal from a stranger, realized she'd just survived something most people wouldn't have. "Thank you," she whispered. Lanfranco nodded once. Then he stood and walked back to the window, his silhouette dark against the city lights, carrying ghosts Jennifer would never fully understand. 5 days after Edward's arrest, Black Lantern reopened. Jennifer had spent those 5 days in a strange limbo, giving statements to federal prosecutors, watching news coverage of Arthur Klein's organization collapsing, and trying to process the fact that she'd somehow become a protected witness in a federal conspiracy case. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda Chen, had been surprisingly kind. "You did good work," she'd told Jennifer after her 3rd interview. "Detailed, accurate, exactly what we needed. Edward Crane is looking at 15 to 20 years. Arthur Klein, he'll die in prison." Jennifer had nodded, still not quite believing any of it was real. Now, walking through Black Lantern's employee entrance on Friday evening, she felt like she was entering a different world. The bar looked the same, amber lighting, polished mahogany, crystal glasses catching the light. But everything had changed. Edward was gone. In his place was a new manager, a woman in her 40s named Patricia, who'd introduced herself that morning with a firm handshake and a warmer smile than Edward had ever managed. "I've heard good things about you," Patricia had said. "Looking forward to working together." The other staff treated Jennifer differently now. Not quite fear, not quite respect, something in between. Marcus, the bartender, had pulled her aside before the shift. "You've got guts, kid," he'd said quietly. "More than most people in this business." That matters. But it was the customers that made Jennifer's chest tight. The Friday night crowd was back, expensive suits, designer dresses, the wealthy elite who'd been coming to Black Lantern for years, and they had no idea what had happened in the shadows of their favorite bar. Table 7 was occupied by a new guest. Table 9 had a different anniversary couple. And Table 12, where Arthur Klein's lieutenant had sat watching her with predatory eyes, now hosted a group of laughing investment bankers celebrating a deal. Life moved on. The city didn't care about one waitress's terror or one mafia boss's protection. It just kept spinning. Jennifer was taking Table 4's drink order when she felt that familiar weight of being watched. But this time, it wasn't threatening. This time, when she looked up at Lanfranco's office window, she saw him standing there, visible for once, his dark eyes meeting hers across the distance. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement. "You survived. You're safe." Jennifer nodded back. Then she returned to her tables, to her work, to the life she'd somehow managed to keep. The explosion happened at 9:47 p.m. Not a literal explosion, but close enough. The front doors of Black Lantern slammed open hard enough to rattle the bottles behind the bar. Every conversation died. Every head turned. Edward Crane stood in the entrance. He looked like hell, his suit wrinkled and stained, his face unshaven, his eyes wild with the kind of desperation that made smart people nervous. He'd been released on bail 3 hours ago, against the prosecutor's recommendations, and apparently he'd come straight here. "Where is she?" Edward's voice cracked across the bar like a whip. His eyes scanned the room and landed on Jennifer. There's the little bitch who ruined everything." Jennifer's blood turned to ice. Around her, customers shifted uncomfortably. Patricia moved toward the phone behind the bar, clearly ready to call the police. Marcus positioned himself between Edward and the main floor, his expression hard. But Edward didn't care about any of them. He was staring at Jennifer with the focused intensity of a man who'd lost everything and had decided to take someone down with him. "You think you're clever?" Edward moved forward, and the crowd parted like water. "You think your little notebook makes you special?" "You destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life," Jennifer said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You stole from people. You framed Lanfranco. You worked with criminals. I worked to survive." Edward was shouting now, spittle flying. "This city eats people like us. I did what I had to do. By hurting others?" Jennifer stood her ground even as Edward advanced. "By stealing? By threatening me?" Edward's hand shot out, reaching for her collar just like he had 2 weeks ago. "You self-righteous little—" He never finished the sentence. Lanfranco stepped out from behind the bar. He must have come down from his office the moment Edward entered, moving through the crowd like smoke, invisible until the moment he chose not to be. Now he stood between Edward and Jennifer, his presence filling the space like a physical force. "Touch her," Lanfranco said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent bar, "and I'll break every bone in your hand before the police arrive." Edward's hand froze mid-reach. His face went white as he registered who was standing in front of him. "Mr. Morris, You're on bail for federal conspiracy charges," Lanfranco continued, his tone conversational but his eyes like ice. "Assault would violate your release conditions. You'd be back in lockup within an hour. Is that really how you want to spend your Friday night?" Around them, the customers watched with the fascinated horror of people witnessing a car crash. Several had their phones out, recording. This would be all over social media within minutes. Edward's desperation cracked into something uglier. "This is your fault. You set me up. You and that waitress, you destroyed me." "No, Edward." Lanfranco stepped closer, and despite being roughly the same height, he seemed to tower over the other man. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided to steal from my customers, the moment you worked with Arthur Klein to frame me, the moment you put your hands on Jennifer." "She's nobody," Edward's voice broke. "She's just a waitress. She's the person who had the courage to do what was right when everyone else, including you, chose to do what was easy." Lanfranco's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "She's worth 100 of you, 1,000. Edward's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies, finding none. His shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. "I'm ruined," he whispered. "Yes," Lanfranco said without sympathy. "You are. Now leave before I have you removed." For a moment, Edward just stood there, swaying slightly, looking like a man staring into an abyss. Then he turned and stumbled toward the door. The crowd parted again, nobody wanting to touch him, to be associated with his fall. He paused at the threshold and looked back at Jennifer one last time. "I hope it was worth it," he said, his voice bitter. Jennifer met his eyes without flinching. "It was." Edward left. The door closed behind him, and slowly, gradually, the normal sounds of Black Lantern returned, conversations resuming, glasses clinking, the gentle hum of wealth and discretion reasserting itself. But Jennifer was shaking. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was draining away, leaving her legs weak and her hands trembling. Lanfranco turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" Jennifer nodded, not trusting her voice. "Patricia, take over Jennifer's section," Lanfranco said to the manager. Then to Jennifer, "Come with me." He led her through the crowd, past the bar, up the stairs to his office. The same office where this had all started. The same door that had rattled when Edward slammed her against it. Inside, Lanfranco poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the expensive bottle on his desk. He handed one to Jennifer. "I don't usually drink on the job," she said, her voice shaky. "You're not on the job right now. You're recovering from an assault." Lanfranco's tone left no room for argument. Jennifer took the glass and sipped. The whiskey burned going down, but it centered her, brought her back into her body. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the bar muted through the thick door. "He was right about one thing," Jennifer said finally. "I am nobody, just a waitress." "No," Lanfranco's voice was firm. "You're the person who refused to be complicit, who documented the truth when everyone else looked away, who survived something that would have broken most people." He met her eyes. "That's not nobody, Jennifer. That's extraordinary." Tears pricked at Jennifer's eyes, but she blinked them back. "What happens now?" Lanfranco moved to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a small leather folder and handed it to her. Jennifer opened it. Inside was an ID badge with her photo and a title that made her breath catch. Jennifer Ruiz, Head of Internal Oversight, Black Lantern Holdings. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Edward's position needs to be filled. But more than that, I need someone I can trust. Someone who sees what others miss. Someone who won't be intimidated or bought or corrupted." Lanfranco's expression was serious. "I'm offering you a job, Jennifer. Not as a waitress. As the person who makes sure Black Lantern and all my other businesses operate with integrity. I don't have experience. I don't have training. You have something better. You have a moral compass that doesn't bend." Lanfranco gestured to the badge. "The salary is $85,000 a year to start. Full benefits. Your own office. And my protection. For whatever that's worth to you." Jennifer stared at the badge, her mind reeling. 2 weeks ago, she was a struggling waitress living paycheck to paycheck. Now she was being offered a position that would change her entire life. "Why?" she asked. "Why me?" Lanfranco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old ghosts. "Because 20 years ago, I failed someone who deserved better. Someone who tried to do the right thing and paid for it with her life." His jaw tightened. "I can't bring Sophia back, but I can make sure people like you, people who refuse to be silent, have a place in this world. A place where courage is rewarded instead of punished." Jennifer looked at the badge, then at Lanfranco. At this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly honorable man who'd saved her life without her even fully realizing it until now. "I'll need training," she said softly. "You'll have it. And I won't compromise. If I see something wrong, even in your organization, I'll report it. I'm counting on it." Jennifer took a shaky breath. Then she nodded. "Okay. Yes, I accept." Something that might have been a smile touched the corner of Lanfranco's mouth. "Good. Now finish your whiskey and go home. You start Monday." Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of New York autumn day where the sky was impossible blue and the air tasted like possibility. Jennifer stood outside Black Lantern at 8:30 a.m., a full 2 hours before the bar would open for lunch service. She wore professional clothes her mother had helped her pick out over the weekend: black slacks, a cream blouse, a blazer that made her look older than 23. Her new ID badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Jennifer Ruiz, head of internal oversight, Black Lantern Holdings. She still couldn't quite believe it was real. The employee entrance opened before she could use her new keycard. Vincent stood there, the same hard-faced man who'd driven her to the warehouse. But this morning, his expression was almost warm. "Miss Ruiz," he said with a nod. "Welcome to your first day. Mr. Morris asked me to show you to your office." "I have an office?" Jennifer had assumed she'd have a desk somewhere, maybe a corner near Patricia's station. Vincent's mouth quirked. "You have an office." He led her through the bar's main floor, empty at this hour, chairs still stacked on tables, the cleaning crew finishing their morning work. But instead of heading upstairs toward Lanfranco's office, Vincent took her to a door she'd never noticed before, tucked between the bar and the kitchen. Behind it was a staircase leading down. "The basement?" Jennifer asked, confused. "The lower level," Vincent corrected, "where the real work happens." The basement, Jennifer remembered the wine storage where Edward had cornered her, was only half the story. Beyond the wine racks was another door, this one requiring a key code. Vincent entered it and gestured for her to follow. The space beyond took her breath away. It was a full operational office, exposed brick walls lined with filing cabinets, a modern desk with dual monitors, comfortable chairs, and a wall of security screens showing feeds from all of Lanfranco's businesses. Not just Black Lantern, but restaurants, clubs, properties she didn't recognize. This was Edward's real office, Vincent explained, where he did the actual work of managing operations. The upstairs office was just for show, for meeting with staff. He gestured to the monitors. "From here, you can access all financial records, security footage, personnel files, everything you need to do your job." Jennifer moved to the desk, running her fingers over the smooth surface. A new nameplate sat at the edge. "Jennifer Ruiz, head of internal oversight. Mr. Morris will be down shortly for your orientation," Vincent said. "In the meantime, familiarize yourself with the systems. Your login credentials are in the envelope on the desk." He paused at the door. "And Miss Ruiz? For what it's worth, I think this is a good move. We need someone with your integrity." Then he was gone, and Jennifer was alone in her new office. She sat in the ergonomic chair, so much more comfortable than anything she'd ever owned, and opened the envelope. Inside were login credentials, a welcome letter from Lanfranco, and a handwritten note. "Jennifer, you survived something that would have destroyed most people. Now let's make sure it never happens to anyone else. Trust your instincts. They've been right so far. L.M." Jennifer's throat tightened. She logged into the system and spent the next 20 minutes exploring. Financial databases, personnel records, security protocols, transaction monitoring systems. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. She pulled out a new notebook, not the spiral-bound one that had started everything, but a leather-bound journal Lanfranco had included in her welcome packet. On the first page, she wrote, "Monday, 8:47 a.m.s. First day. Goal: learn everything, protect everyone, never compromise." A knock on the door made her look up. Lanfranco stood in the doorway, looking impossibly put together in a charcoal suit, his dark eyes assessing her with that same intensity she'd come to recognize. "How's the office?" he asked. "Intimidating," Jennifer admitted, "but incredible." Lanfranco entered and leaned against the desk, his posture casual but his attention focused. "I'm not going to pretend this will be easy. You'll be overseeing operations worth tens of millions of dollars. You'll be investigating discrepancies, interviewing staff, making recommendations that could end careers. People will resent you. Some will try to undermine you." "That doesn't sound encouraging," Jennifer said. "It's not meant to be encouraging. It's meant to be honest." Lanfranco's expression was serious. "But here's what else is true. You have my complete support. When you make a call, it carries my authority. When you find a problem, you report it directly to me, and I will act on it. No exceptions. No special treatment for anyone. Even you? Jennifer asked quietly. Lanfranco's mouth curved into something that might have been respect. Especially me. If you find something in my operations that crosses lines, you report it. That's the job. Jennifer held his gaze. And if I find something, then we fix it, together. Lanfranco straightened. I'm building something here, Jennifer. Not just a bar or a business, but an organization that operates with integrity even in a world that often doesn't reward it. You're going to help me do that. He moved to the security monitors and gestured to the feeds. These are your responsibilities now. Black Lantern, obviously, but also Meridian Club downtown, Crimson Sky Rooftop Bar, and 3 restaurants across Manhattan. All legitimate businesses, all needing oversight. That's a lot, Jennifer breathed. You'll have support staff, assistants, auditors, investigators, but you're in charge. Your word is final. Lanfranco turned back to her. The salary I mentioned, $85,000, that's base. Annual bonuses based on performance. Healthcare, retirement, all of it. You take care of my businesses, I take care of you. Jennifer's mind was spinning. 2 weeks ago, she'd been worried about making rent. Now she was being handed responsibility for an empire. I need to know something, she said suddenly. The things you do, the parts of your business that aren't legitimate. Will I be exposed to that? Lanfranco was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. No. Your role is legitimate operations only. The other aspects of my life, the parts that exist in shadows, those stay separate. You'll never be asked to compromise yourself or break laws. That's not what this is. But you'll still be doing those things. Yes. His honesty was brutal. I won't lie to you about who I am or what I do. But I'm offering you a position in the legitimate side of my world. Clean money, clean work, clean conscience. What you choose to do with that offer is up to you. Jennifer thought about her mother, scrubbing other people's floors for 20 years, about the customers at Black Lantern who deserved honest service, about Sophia, the sister Lanfranco had lost because she'd tried to do the right thing in a world that punished it. Okay, she said finally. I'm in. But we do this my way. No cutting corners, no compromises. I wouldn't have it any other way. Lanfranco extended his hand. Jennifer shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and carried the weight of a promise. 3 months later, Jennifer stood at the window of her basement office, coffee in hand, reviewing the morning reports. Black Lantern's operations were clean, she'd made sure of it. Every transaction tracked, every charge verified, every employee vetted. She'd fired 3 people in her first month, 1 bartender skimming tips, 1 server using customers' credit card information, 1 kitchen manager accepting kickbacks from suppliers. Each termination had been documented, justified, and backed by evidence she'd gathered personally. The staff feared her a little now. But they also respected her. And more importantly, they behaved. Upstairs, Black Lantern was preparing for lunch service. Patricia managed the floor with competent efficiency. Marcus mixed drinks with the same careful hands. The customers would arrive soon, expecting the same excellence they'd always received. And now, they'd actually get it. Jennifer's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Mommy, Mija, I'm so proud of you. You're changing the world, one honest bill at a time. Ti amo. Jennifer smiled, her eyes stinging slightly. She typed back, Love you too, Mommy. See you for dinner Sunday. Another knock on her door. Vincent entered with a tablet. Miss Ruiz, we've got a discrepancy at Crimson Sky. Inventory doesn't match purchases. Looks like someone's diverting premium liquor. Jennifer set down her coffee and took the tablet, her mind already analyzing. Show me the records. I want receipts, security footage, and interviews with everyone who had access. Already pulled them, Vincent said with approval. This was her life now, protecting people who didn't even know they needed protection. Holding the line between honest business and the shortcuts that destroyed integrity. Being the person who refused to look away. Lanfranco had given her more than a job. He'd given her purpose. And Jennifer Ruiz, the shy waitress who'd refused to steal from a customer, who'd stood up to her manager despite the cost, who'd survived something that should have broken her, had become something new. Someone untouchable, someone respected, someone who mattered. The girl who'd cried against the office door was gone. In her place stood a woman who would never let anyone else suffer the way she had. And that, Jennifer thought as she reviewed the Crimson Sky discrepancies, was worth every moment of fear she'd endured. Late that evening, after the last customer had left Black Lantern and the cleaning crew had finished, Lanfranco stood in his office, looking down at the bar floor through his one-way window. Jennifer was at a corner table, her laptop open, still working despite the late hour. Always thorough, always dedicated. He thought about Sophia, about the promise he'd made at her grave 20 years ago that he'd build something better, something that protected people like her instead of consuming them. It had taken 2 decades, but maybe he'd finally kept that promise. His phone buzzed. Vincent. Arthur Klein sentenced to 40 years. Edward Crane to 18. It's over. Lanfranco typed back. Good. Then he locked his office, descended the stairs, and paused at Jennifer's table. She looked up, surprised. Mr. Morris, I thought you'd left. It's late. You should go home. Just finishing the Crimson Sky report. I'll have recommendations by tomorrow. Lanfranco nodded, then surprised himself by saying, You did good work, Jennifer. Better than I could have hoped. She smiled that genuine, unguarded smile that reminded him why he'd taken this chance. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, sir. Lanfranco, he corrected. We're colleagues now. Her smile widened. Lanfranco. He left her to her work and walked out into the New York night. The city glittered around him, dangerous and beautiful and full of people trying to survive, to thrive, to matter. Somewhere in that chaos was another Jennifer, another person who needed protection. And now, for the first time in 20 years, Lanfranco had built something that could offer it. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.